welcome into Strategies for Living. I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. Delighted that you've tuned in, joined with me today here on Strategies. This is an exciting day. It's always good to have Ben Riggs. You're almost a guest host, Ben.
Yeah, I've been on the
a few
show
times.
and the radio program.
But today's a special day because I know from our relationship, you've been working on this for a long, long time. You got a brand new book out.
Yeah.
Finding God in the Body, a spiritual path for the modern West. Congratulations, my friend.
Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be done with it.
And I tell you what, how many years? How many years have you been working on this?
It was close to 5.
I know through the years, I've asked you, how's your book coming? How's your book coming? You get tired of answering that question?
No.
No.
That would come in considerably lower than how tall are you?
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you something. Folks, you got to know Ben Riggs has written an excellent book. This is a great book.
Oh, I appreciate it.
How did it come to be? How did it gel for you? How did you decide 5 years ago, got to write a book, want to write a book? How did that come to be, Ben?
I don't remember exactly, but the bit that comes to mind was the editor at a magazine that I write for, an online magazine that I write for, had said that he was starting a publishing company, and what he wanted to do is take articles and basically piecemeal together books from contributors, and he was going to do that with one of my books. And I started to think, well, why would I want you to do that?
Why can't I do that?
So I pulled the articles that I thought would make for a good book off of the site, and then started kind of like mapping them out, and then started editing them, and then eventually would delete one and then write a whole new chapter, and then eventually it just turned into a completely different book than what I intended to start writing. But it was a book that I felt like was needed.
Yeah, you get our attention in both the title of the book, Finding God in the Body. Want to talk about that, but the I guess you could call the postscript to the title, A Spiritual Path for the Modern West. Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. Why do we need yet another spiritual path for our modern West?
Well, I would say that there isn't necessarily one. I would say that religion and spirituality in the West trade so much in the economy of belief that there isn't actually a path. There's just a lot of like what I think and what I believe, but there are no practices that are bound to that belief system that actually enable you to come to embody or to manifest or express those beliefs through your
body.
actions.
And then back to the title, Finding God in the Body. One of the things that struck me in reading this book, and again, I'll ask you, because people confuse religion and spirituality. I think this book could be very, very useful for many on many different paths, many different religious paths. But there's a difference between religion and spirituality, even though we make those, synonyms? Is that the word? Yeah, synonyms. But they're not necessarily, are they?
No, religion is technically, it's the institutionalization of spirituality.
Right.
And within any...
The hope would be that religion would be the doorway to spirituality. But you and I have talked before. I know a lot of people who are religious. They're not the least bit spiritual.
Well, there are whole buildings and churches and institutions devoted to the preservation and advancement of religious ideology, but there is no spirituality in that.
Yeah, and vice versa. Also, I know lots of spiritual people who are not religious.
Yeah. Well, within religion, there has always been. I'm talking for centuries. There has always been the conflict between the esoteric, the internalized spirituality, and the exoteric. Dogma-oriented approach to external structures and whatnot that really take away from the personal experience of the divine.
Mm-hmm. So, a teacher named Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you.
Yeah.
Was he talking about in the body, like you're title?
Well, I think actually long before I got to it, Paul, I believe, in his letter to the people of Corinth, talked about how he asked the question, do you not know that the body is the temple? In ancient Israel, the temple was the house of God. It's where God lived.
Right.
All right. And so when Paul asked that question, what Paul is asking is he's saying, do you not know that God lives in your body, not in a building?
Right.
And so I don't think this is a particularly like new age idea. In fact, I would argue
It's an old age.
yeah,
it's very old
in fact,
age.
I would argue it's the foundation, and that not having an appreciation for that actually is what caused much of spirituality in the West to sort of lose touch or get off the track.
What's the starting place? You talk about early on in the book the truth of suffering, and I guess we all life is difficult, like Scott Peck says in The Road Less Traveled, and that's not a new idea with him. That's an idea from Buddhism, isn't it?
Yeah. So the reason I start the book, the first chapter, there's an introduction before it, but the reason why I start the book with the chapter called The Truth of Suffering is, and you can take this book for example, there are a number of different reasons why somebody would purchase that book. They might be my father, and they just want to buy the book to support their kid,
right?
Or be a friend or whatever.
Right.
The book might have a title that is intellectually interesting to them, and they're just curious, and they
might have a great cover, and it does.
Yeah, they're just intrigued on a more of a I guess you could say superficial level, not like superficial in a bad, but they're just kind of curious and then wants to thumb through it.
Right.
But in that book, there are a bunch of practices, basic meditation practice, personal examination practices like inventory and things like that, both vocal and silent prayer, and then somatic or body-based meditation. And to commit yourself to those practices over an extended period of time, the only way that somebody would ever do that, the only motivation for doing that is that they won't change. They're looking for transformation. And so nobody comes to the spiritual path except for suffering. Suffering is the sole reason that people come into spirituality in terms of a practice tradition. And that's why I start the book with The Truth of Suffering, because that's why you're reading it.
The examined life. Are most of our lives unexamined? Do most of us live, lives of quiet desperation, to quote another famous author, besides Ben Riggs?
Yeah. Well, the examined life is a take from Plato's The Apology. I think it's line 38C in The Apology. He says, the unexamined life is not worth living. And so basically chapter 2 is, well, then you better get to examining.
You better get going.
And there's a lot of questions that I think we fail to ask ourselves.
Like what?
Well, you could
the big
take
questions like, who am I, where am I going, what am I doing here?
Who am I is a question that I think most people ask themselves, and they're forced to ask themselves by routine identity crisis that most everybody's going to have throughout the course of their life. I think most of the time the answers are superficial. We answer them with things that we do or things that we are related to versus with...
And back to religions for a moment, that most religions do offer us through their creed or code or cult or all three of those answers to those questions.
They give us answers, but unless we're willing to ask ourselves what those answers mean, they don't really answer the question.
Right.
And the thing with who am I?
And there's somebody else's answers to those very basic questions.
And it's not even to say that their answers aren't right. It's just to say that we have to arrive at them in the same way that they arrived at those answers. Ramana Maharishi, the great Indian sage, he wouldn't offer his students any practice other than the question, who am I? Over and over and over and over again. And every time you answered it, he would want to know who gave you that answer. And it would just become this infinite regression into the question, who am I? And one of the things I suggest in the book is that when the question, who am I, ceases to be a question and it becomes a statement, then you found what you're looking for. The idea that the ego can answer that question, which is what most everybody's settling for when they turn and answer that question with things that they do or people that they know or relationships that they have or clothes that they wear or music that they like. That they're answering that question with ego. They're saying, I am ego. And those are, they're trends. Like, I don't listen to the same music today I listened to when I was 18, and I'm not going to listen to the same music when I'm 60 that I listen to now.
All right, now let's define ego, because ego is one of those words that can be confusing.
Yeah. It's ambiguous.
It's ambiguous. Yeah. Many people viewing right now maybe think of ego, oh, that's somebody like maybe a politician we all know and love right now. Maybe we can't get our head through the door. Yeah. That's ego, but you're talking about something different.
Yeah, so the ego is a basic, it's a basic function of our mind. A good example of ego would be if you're, walking through the Serengeti and you see a little cub playing around over there in the brush. Mm-hmm. You might think, well, that's a cute little cat, and want to go over there and pet it. But your ego is this sort of conceptual proxy self that you're able to insert into that situation and see what the potential outcome of picking up that cub would be. Right. So it's a kind of proxy that weighs the pros and cons of any given situation. It's very helpful. And it's what enabled me and you to arrange this meeting and be here today. Right. And all that. We need our ego because it's the vehicle through which we ride this life. However, and it's a big however, and we'll come back to it after the break. We got to take a break. Benjamin Riggs, the author of Finding God in the Body, A Spiritual Path for the West. You can go to findinggodinthebody.com or you can go to amazon.com to get your copy of the book, and I hope you will. Come back with us. Much more to learn today on Strategies from Benjamin Riggs. We'll be right back.
Interested in the world of security and enjoy technology? How about training for a job that combines both? At Bossier Parish Community College, you can begin a career in network security, earn national credentials and certifications, gain valuable internship experience, and train in the fast-growing field of cyber technology. You'll have a support team, small class size, and hands-on learning. At Bossier Parish Community College, we're nationally recognized as a center of academic excellence in information assurance by the Department of Homeland Security and the National Security Agency. To learn more, call us today.
Television version of Strategies for Living. Of course, you're watching Strategies, and I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan, but you can listen to Strategies. News Radio 710 Keel. We're in our 25th year this year on News Radio 710 Keel and 101.7 FM, and that's Strategies for Living on Sunday mornings, 9:05 to 10. You can also find us at www.strategiesforliving.com. Today, Ben Riggs with us, the author of Finding God in the Body. Great book. My only complaint is I lost sleep. Couldn't put the book down. So, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, I lost sleep writing it. But,
I bet you did.
But one of my other goals with the book, too, is I wanted to make it something that was intellectually challenging, but also short enough that it was actually, something you can get through.
Very thought-provoking, and we started a thought-provoking conversation going into the break. So you were saying we were moving through, and we saw we saw a little animal, cute little cub. However, our ego is saying, I may not want to go over and pet this little kitty.
The ego is a conceptual self that our brain generates and then projects out into the world to weigh the pros and cons of any given situation. It weighs the pros and cons of going over and petting that little lion cub. It also weighs the pros and cons of walking up and asking a girl out in a group full of people and how embarrassing that could be, or whatever the case might be. It weighs the pros and cons. Weighs the pros and cons of all that stuff.
So, however, it's like an operating system then. It's a compilation of our beliefs, The
It's an
messages,
aspect of an operating
stories.
system.
Okay,
It's
all
an
right.
aspect of an operating system. It's an avatar for an operating system, might be a better way of thinking of it.
Okay, all right.
And that avatar is projected out into the world.
Okay.
All right? And that's not a problem.
Yeah.
That's necessary.
Right.
The problem becomes when you see that group of people over there and there's the girl you want to go up and ask out, and you insert yourself conceptually into that situation and you ask her out, and then your fears kick in. You know, perhaps you're somebody who has a fear of abandonment or whatever the case might be, and then that button gets pushed. Stress gets released, adrenaline and cortisol start flowing through the system. Now your thoughts are going faster, and as your thoughts move faster, it's like an airplane propeller. And when they're going slow, those blades are 5 individual blades spinning in space. But as that stress comes in, now those blades are spinning so fast that it starts to look like a solid disk and not
Right.
5 individual propellers. And
Right.
at that point, that conceptual self that's been projected out into the world begins to look like a solid disk. And we can't tell the difference between that projected self and who we really are. We get confused. And we take the ego for being our real self. And at that point, the ego becomes a false self.
Okay, so when our ego seems to be who we really are, and there's no other solution that I can think of, we're trapped.
Yeah.
We're trapped. And
Well,
finding...
you start experiencing psychological stress from that point.
Right.
Because if I really do believe that I'm the person that's been projected into this situation,
Right.
then the quality of my life waxes and wanes with the answer to the question she gives me.
So if I find God in the body, I'm going to have an easier time asking this girl out. Or,
Maybe not.
well, then what good is it?
Well, I think it enables you to be more honest about how difficult it is to go over there and do that.
Okay.
I think it that ability to be honest about how difficult it is for you to go over and do that could be looked at from a couple of different points of view. For example, it would enable you to see this as a shortcoming of your own that must be worked with, an aspect of your own path that you have to turn into rather than hide from. And then that, I mean, without really churching it up that much, we don't even have to call that spirituality. That's just the maturation process. That's
Right.
psychological and emotional maturation.
It's
that any
it's
human-
practicality.
Yeah.
It's practical living.
Any human has to go through that. And
Right.
what this and I think that if you really want to take spirituality for what it is, all it is a system of tools and practices that enable us to move through that process of maturation and actually grow into the human that we were intended to be.
You have an intriguing chapter 7 in the book.
Yeah.
The space between fundamentalism and atheism. What are you talking about?
There's a fatuous debate that takes place in religious scientific circles where it's basically a hard-nosed atheist that believes everything about religion is just absolutely false. He props up a straw man of religion by saying that there's an old man in the sky that created the world in 7 days, and then he knocks it down with what we know from modern science.
Right.
And if we're arguing with people like Dinesh D'Souza or Franklin Graham, then I'd probably be sitting at the table with the atheist. However, atheism has a much more difficult time when they turn their attention towards what I would consider I feel comfortable with this label. You could call me a Christian atheist.
A Christian atheist.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a spirituality that's about moving beyond that false identification with the ego and down into the body where we can experience the realm of the beyond.
So you're talking beyond theism then?
Well, theism in its typical definition,
Right.
I advocate for a particular type of theism in the book, which has more to do with not necessarily relating to an anthropomorphic God, but to a God of being. Because here's the deal. You can't say...
Was it Tillich who
Yes.
identified God as the ground of all being?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can't say that God is the highest of all beings. You can't think of God as sort of CEO in this universal structure. The problem with that is when you say God is the highest of all beings, you are saying God is a being. And when
Right.
God becomes a being, he is now subject to finitude.
Right.
And therefore cannot be God because he is not infinite. And so God cannot be a being. God has to be a symbol for being itself. And being itself is something that everything that is participates in. which is, I believe, what the response Moses got on Mount Sinai, I am that I am. I believe that I am that I am that I am that I am. That's what that's pointing to, is that experience of being in which everything participates. And when I say finding God in the body, I'm talking about the fact that our body, through its basic awareness, is rooted in the experience of being. And through practices like prayer and meditation, we can actually turn into the body, relax down into that basic awareness, and have an immediate experience of God that is not revealed to us through beliefs that someone else has established or through conceptual language at all.
Again, it's within us.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I've got this exactly right, but is that like a microcosm of the macrocosm?
Yeah, and at the very last chapter, The Mind of God, it deals with the concepts of microcosm and macrocosm, and an external world and an internal world. And it basically, but I don't know that this is the best place to go into it, but to sum it all up, I would say, essentially what we begin to realize, there's a great Zen koan where there's one Zen priest standing there staring at a flag on a pole, and he says, the flag is moving. And then another guy comes up and argues with him and says, no, the wind is moving. And then the sixth patriarch comes up and says, no, you're both fools. Neither the flag nor the wind is moving. Your mind is moving. And what you learn from that is that everything, like it doesn't matter if we're talking about the cameras, the table, you, me, the words, the book, all of it is arising like a wave within basic awareness.
All right.
Everything is arising out of mind.
So have we confused you? You know, like a good professor. Hopefully Benjamin Riggs has stirred us up. You want to get unstirred? You got to go get the book. There's a lot in here. It's packed full. You've gotten just a sampling of it today. Finding God in the Body, A Spiritual Path for the West. This is a good book, folks. FindingGodInTheBody.com or at Amazon.com. Go pick it up. You're going to love this. Ben Riggs, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Great job. Look forward to the next one. You already working on the next one?
I'm actually,
All right.
getting geared up for it.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to Strategies for Living. Don't forget Strategies for Living on the radio in our 25th year on News Radio 710 Keel at 9:05 to 10 a.m. Sunday mornings. For Ben Riggs, I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. See you next time here on Strategies for Living.